Oh my gosh, so. Well, welcome to September's edition of Monday Nights with Jen Weir. The title is not very clever, but it's what I got. That's basically what we do because it leaves it open to talk about whatever we feel needs to be discussed at the time. This month, we are discussing 4 different emotions that I am quite certain at some point we all have felt these. They are rejection, unworthiness, isolation, and the last week we'll talk about healing your spiritual vision or vision. We'll have a time of sharing about what that looks like to actually catch a vision. It's something that over the last now almost 13 months of being a widow, I'm like, I could have used this class about 6 months ago. So I want to offer it out to those of you who are like, you know what, I need some help with my vision. But that's at the end. And I just want to give you a heads up of what to expect in the month of September. These are a one-off, but they also go together. Tonight, we begin sharing about ways to find freedom and healing from rejection. We've all felt it. We've all experienced it. If you were a kid on the playground, you've had it at least once in your life. I don't know anybody who wasn't at some point last picked in dodgeball, soccer, whatever. And it's like, well, I know I'm tall and all this height is wasted because I'm not athletic, but please pick me, at least middle. We've all had it. And we'll talk about what that looks like and how it helps to appropriately deal with it. But before we get into the actual nitty-gritty of the specific emotions, the one thing that I felt really pressed to discuss tonight is why the oils work so well on our emotions. For those of you who have sat in my class for even once, my emotion classes, this is not new information, but it's relevant and it needs to be shared again and again and again so that it sticks, so that it becomes a part of you. I've shared this recently, but I'll share it again for those of you who haven't been with me in a while. I started listening to some really old Gary Young CDs, and it's been really fun to pick it old school. I have a little boom box here on the desk and pop in a CD, and you hear his passion and you hear the reason why he created the oils and just the purity and all of these cool things. And it's most of it is stuff I've heard before, and I remember what I have always known. And it really seals in my conviction and the passion that I have for healing with essential oils emotionally and your body and your spirit and all that. But it was really fun for me to remember the information. And so as we dive in here in a moment, think of this as a time as remembering everything that you already know about your oils. The second portion of that idea and that thought process is our oils, as we've shared, these are God's word in a drop, right? Our friend Sherry said that a year or so ago, and it just stuck with me. God said, let there be cedarwood. It was so. And now we distill it down. We have these beautiful drops. Well, guess what? We're also created by him. And so there's something in us intuitively that we just know how to use these. We just know that they're good for us. It's like I mentioned earlier. Yes, we're going to be working with joy, acceptance, and purification tonight. But if there's an oil that you are so drawn to, please go with that. Your intuition, your body, your soul, your emotions are drawn to that for a specific reason. I shared a bit ago that I have been so drawn to wintergreen. And what I didn't realize is that the shock of losing my husband actually reverberated all the way down into my bones. And I found that because my friend had done a tuning fork therapy on me. And it was really quite by accident because I was there for my daughter, my littlest. But she was doing it on me to show Selah, it's totally safe. This isn't a big deal. It's not woo-woo. We just bing little forks and let it go. And you don't feel anything. But when my friend did that, it reverberated so much into her bones, and she actually got a searing pain up her arm from my emotions. It was powerful. And I went back and thought, that's why I've been so drawn to wintergreen. It was wild. So have your notes or a pen, maybe a Post-it note, a journal, whatever you use right now, to just jot down some information about our oils. So pretend that you are going back to the kindergarten classroom of learning essential oils, right? It's like we're going to learn our alphabet. We're going to learn language and the languaging of essential oils. This information must sink in. It's important for us to remember this, to re-remember, so that we can create freedom in our brain. In order to understand how the oils work, grasping this is really key, because we want to know how they work within our cells and within the brain especially. So 1 drop of our essential oil, and if you have an oil, which I suspect each one of you do, just take an oil now, just 1 drop. My oil of choice tonight for me personally is juniper, and I'm really excited to go back and study a little bit more about juniper and find out why on earth am I so drawn to that today. But if you put that in your hand, let it just sit down and look at it as I talk, and maybe let the molecules and the aroma just wash over your mind and your brain. That 1 drop that you just put in your hand, that you're now rubbing together, that's now permeating your room, it's now going into your olfactory senses, has 40 million trillion molecules. It would take a lifetime to count up that much on your own. But numerically, that's a 4 with 19 zeros after it. Yet we only have 100 trillion cells in our body. So I'm going to say that again. If you want to write those numbers down just to get a visual, 40 million trillion, that's how many molecules are in one drop of essential oils. So it's 4 with 19 zeros after it. And we have in our bodies a mere paltry 100 trillion cells in our bodies. So think about it. 1 drop. 1 drop of our essential oil contains enough molecules to cover every cell in our body with 40,000 molecules. There was a trend going on, I don't know, a while back. I think I watch these trends with Young Living, people, and we do silly things sometimes just for fun. And one of them was to dump a whole bottle of oil on your head. It was so hard for me because I walked on to our farm in Idaho with one of my members. I went to go visit her and teach a class up there one time. And I said, hey, let's go to the farm. She said, don't you need an appointment? I'm like, no. They said, you can walk on. Let's test this theory. And I did, and they did. I did. And I said, hey, can I come look at the farm? She goes, I'm kind of busy. You could just see what she was thinking. I said, well, do you mind if we just look around? And my member, you guys say we can always walk on. She says, you know what? She says, yeah, absolutely. You can, but my stuff can wait. She spent 2.5 hours with us. This woman that was so busy. So I'm sorry if, a few years ago, some of your oils were late because my friend and I took up 2.5 hours of her time. But we walked through, she showed us everything. And I said, what's one thing that you would want me to tell my members when I go back? And I say this in a lot of classes, but it bears repeating. She says, please tell them to stop wasting our oils. She says, most people don't understand how much time and effort and work and energy it takes to harvest this by hand. A lot of times they weed it by hand. The Melissa that grows up there, they have to treat Melissa so gently. It's a fight between the rabbits and them to get to the Melissa before the rabbits do. I understand that so passionately because it's a fight between the rabbits here and my lettuce that I'm growing. Sometimes I win, sometimes those rabbits get fatter. But when we think about her words, and she says, just understand, this takes a lot. This takes a lot. It takes time for this to grow. And we are at the mercy of creation, rain, sun, heat, floods, all of that. We have to understand that one little drop will definitely do us. Even if it's, I think it's so interesting when we say, well, that bottle of cedar would only cost $12. Like, it's okay. It's not like Melissa that costs, I don't know, what is it now, $150 something? Listen, it's not like it takes any less time. In the cooker, they have to cook a certain amount of hours. And you guys know, if you've studied with Young Living long enough, that we only keep 30% because it's not perfect enough. So with that in mind, and we know that one drop is going to cover it. One drop is going to wash over all of your cells in your body with 40,000 molecules. Considering it only takes just one molecule of the right kind to open up our receptor site and communicate with our DNA to alter cellular function, you can look that up on PubMed. That is not the world according to Jen Weir or Young Living at all. That is a PubMed stat. But it alters your cellular function. You can see why just inhaling this, a small little vapor, can have profound effects on your body and your brain and your emotions. So if you all share oils with people, and maybe they don't necessarily, they're nervous to put it on their bodies, they're new. There was somebody who had a comment today that using Breathe Again, though they love it, it causes a little bit of a response on their skin. Maybe their skin has a reaction. That's fine. Even just smelling it is plenty. Because as you just did this, you smell all of that, and it's going to have the same effect as if you were to apply it. So research will show that when inhaling these oils, all the constituents in it, which we'll talk about in just a moment, that it can stimulate the olfactory receptors, and activate regions in our brain's limbic system that's associated with memory, emotion, and the state of mind. So that is where all of our memories are stored. In short, smell unlocks, it's a key to memories. The smell is the key to memories. Today in our oily group, I was sharing just some recipes to swap out your candles. If you were maybe you're not such a closet candle lover, but it was something that I really enjoyed way back when, because it made me think fall, and then of course Christmas time, like who doesn't love that? What I realize is even smelling certain things makes me remember my mom's cookies, remember that crisp fall air, just remember those times of pumpkin carving and all that, because you'd always have maybe the pumpkin cookies baking or bread or whatever. It triggers those memories. Conversely, and this is for anybody who's ever used oils that you've smelled something and it's not pleasant to you, or you don't necessarily like the way it smells, and maybe it's not necessarily the way that it smells, there's just something that's very off-putting about it. Chances are it's triggering a negative memory that you have long forgotten about, that you don't even realize. And so for those of us who share essential oils with people as part of our trade, we would be wise to take that as a little clue, to not force it on them, or not say, well, that means you need it or whatever. Just gently take a note and say, okay, well, maybe this is, perhaps consider this oil does help with these emotions or with this condition in the body. Just consider that maybe this oil has now unlocked something that your mind or your body or both were not ready for. Just really educating your people and letting them know there's a reason why you're having an adverse response to it. If something smells like pickles, I think Monstrante smells like dill pickles. You can't argue with me and tell me it doesn't. It does to me. Maybe you don't think it does. And I don't know why. I like pickles, but if I didn't like pickles, I wouldn't like that oil. So there's just a funny thing that happens when you smell the oils, is it unlocks those memories. Yeah, I could see where that would smell like dill pickles too. That's so funny, Lisa. So as the brain center is being triggered and opened, the memory and the emotions are being tapped into. We call this the subconscious brain. So in less than a second, an aroma that you smell, the scent of the oil, has the power to activate a number of physical and emotional responses, as I mentioned just a minute ago, that maybe you had forgotten about. Or on a negative side, as we start to talk a little bit more about negative emotions and how to have freedom from them and receive the positive ones that we're always meant to have, maybe we did not realize that they were an issue. it's funny, this issue, this emotion of rejection, it's not my style. I don't enjoy talking about negative emotions. I like to speak about positive emotions. I don't like even saying negative emotion words because they have such a low frequency. And yet my job is to bring an awareness to what is out there and just say, okay, I'm going to acknowledge this is that, but now I'm going to help you all move through it. But even as we talk about the word rejection, and it occurred to, at first I thought, well, gosh, how many people, maybe not very many people feel rejection right now. But then I remembered that we were all children at one time. And there was some time where maybe some of us have tried to go get a job that we were not suited for. There's just different things that happen in life that maybe we forgot. And it's good to every once in a while, as this comes up, and ask, is this something that I struggle with or have had? Is there anything pinging or sticking that I could do a little soul cleaning? It's like taking a scrub brush to your emotions and just okay, just in case anything's there, we're going to move along and clear it out. Right? So certain essential oils work by calming the the central nervous system. It helps us relax instead of allowing a buildup of anxiousness in the body. What's commonly labeled as anxiety has been shown by science, as they study it, to have an incredibly acidic effect on the body. In other words, you could eat the most high alkaline foods, the most optimal, pristine vegetables, all your kale, all your lemon water, all of that. And yet, if there's a buildup of anxiety, it becomes acidic in the cells. Our hormonal response then activates an enzyme, which results in the anxiety being stored in our DNA. And essential oils support the body at minimizing this reaction. What's incredible about using oils with great intention, and this is one of the things that we'll discuss throughout this month, is as we start to use them with intention and just pausing for a moment, causing ourselves to slow down for just a few extra minutes so that we can look and see, what are we drawn to? Maybe even doing a muscle testing. See what our eyes land on first, opening the bottle, smelling it, and start to work with it a little bit more. You know, Gary Young would always say, and I think we've all quoted him saying, he would say, use what you have in your pocket. And when someone asks, Jen, what's a good oil for this and such emotion? I mean, of course, I'll say, well, I've seen this one or that. This is what the book says. But what have you got? You know, tonight we're talking about acceptance, purification, and joy. But if you don't have any of those three, I would then ask you, what do you have? What do you love? Play around with those oils and see what happens. Essential oils can help release old emotional traumas. And it's not to open Pandora's box or to dwell on the past. I mean, we definitely want to keep the past as this teeny weeny review mirror, but always keep our eyes on that big windshield, that what's out in front of us, and also what's happening in the now. But there was a study done years ago that discovered that our amygdala plays a role in storage and releasing of these emotional traumas. It was also suggested that, again, aromas could trigger an emotional release. So again, you might wonder, well, why would I want to open that up? It's not to hash out anything. It's just to gently release things that don't belong in your body. You know, we do liver cleanses or colon cleanses or gut cleanses, all these different things. And many times we release toxins that we didn't even know were there. If you're like me, I have zero use in time for discovering what sinister things could be in my body systems. When I went to Ecuador, I didn't care to do any of those sort of testing. I'm like, no, I just want to do a cleanse and I'm all set. Like, I don't need to know what's in there because I know what can get everything out. And so I might take a drop of Acatea for a season so that I can work on and make sure that I don't have any parasites. Do I necessarily need to know what they are? Not at all. Can I easily get them out by using certain oils and different supplements? Absolutely. So in a class like this, as we start to have an awareness of certain emotions, maybe you don't have a need to tap in and say, oh, I'm going to hash it every time I felt rejected, if it's not something that it feels like it sticks. But using an oil like acceptance with intention, just saying, I choose to lose this from my body, and I receive full acceptance and full joy and community for a week, and see how you feel. Just a little shift. The amygdala, in case you weren't aware, it's the watchdog of the brain. It's constantly on the lookout to see friend or foe, safe or danger in all of our environments. In a matter of seconds, our amygdala helps trigger that fight, flight, freeze response. And I think now they've added to it fawn, faint. They've added all these F words, the good F words to it, but they've added to it. I don't honestly, I know I teach this, but I don't really care to keep up with the lingo of the times, because it's just, look, it's the emotion that tells it's the part of your brain that tells your body how to respond to an unsavory situation. We all respond to those situations differently. And sometimes our response can surprise us. You might think that you're a fighter, and sometimes you might be in a freeze position. If you have the amygdala, if it responds to where you freeze, or you faint, or you just put your head in the sand, or whatever it is, and the emotion isn't necessarily dealt with, it can get locked in we'll call it the downstairs part of the brain. And it's unable then to be accessed by the logic reason, the executive portion of the brain. If we stay in that lockdown state, the downstairs survival brain, as it were, for too long, the brain does begin to rewire itself. Our body, our brain will actually carve new pathways in the brain. And this is where we get to the goodness of our time together. Because we all have had our brains wired for different things, good and bad, positive and negative. I was having a conversation with a woman today, and we were talking about trades, jobs, what should she do? And I said, here's the thing. Most people have a poverty mindset unless they've specifically worked on that portion, because our Western culture does. And I don't want to get into all of that. And if some of you are now like, wait, what did she mean? It was just this, the point is to just listen to the conversation about the point of it. She's like, well, I thought I didn't have that, but there was this, like, I have to do this in order to make money, but what I really want to do is this. I said, see, that right there, that is, I mean, and the poverty mindset can manifest in a bunch of different ways. It's not just like a belief that you shouldn't be wealthy or believe you should be wealthy, none of that. It really boils down to a lot more. But I was sharing with her, it's not a bad thing. What we have to remember is the hard wiring that happens in childhood, the things that we learn from mom, dad, both, grandma, grandpa, people in our neighborhood, right? In our mental neighborhood, it rewires your brain. And then as you are in your 30s or your 40s or even your 50s and 60s, and you think, I want to do this, but I have this wiring in my brain because mom and dad had parents who went through the Depression, and they had parents who went through this crash and all of that. Now, the way I think about money is a very 1929 mindset, not a 2022. So the wiring gets locked in until we're aware of it and say, oh, well, I don't like how my brain thinks about that. I want to rewire it. Knowing that it can happen is powerful. When we start to release trapped emotions, or even we want to rewire our brain and think differently, the word of God says, do not be conformed to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind, right? So we can now transform our brain. This is a lot of science, but it's good and it's helpful. And if I can chat with you all about science for a moment, it disconnects from the emotion of the emotions. So if you find yourself ever, as you dive into emotional healing and it starts to get a little uncomfortable, switch to your logic brain and look at it objectively. Remind yourself that you are using these oils to rewrite, to build something new. Dr. Caroline Leaf, and she says it so much better than I could articulate it, but she talks about your brain building little bridges and lollipops. The more you learn something, the more you heal in an area, you start to build new bridges and you build new roads in the brain. That's all we're doing. We're causing our brain to think differently. As we dive in, going through this month, and we talk about finding worthiness and acceptance and community and having great vision and finding joy again. How each one of us goes about that is as different as our DNA, because our DNA is incredibly different. So remember that everything I share that's not rooted in science is an offering. I've been working with humans for 100 years, from cutting their hair to doing essential oils and emotions and all that in coaching. This is what I've seen play out and work, but the way that you put it into action, you might find something powerfully different. So there's three main constituents that I'd love to share with you all that are in our oils. Now, of course, when you run it through whatever they run it through at the labs, you're going to find a whole bunch more. But these are three main ones that matter for our emotions and our brain. This is also just an aside. If you have children, or even for yourself, when children or an adult or anybody is trying to learn something new, let's say in school, maybe you're taking a class, learning foreign languages, learning a new skill set, knowing what oils are going to help with that is important. I think about children because it's really my wheelhouse. I have a bunch of them. I've homeschooled them for, gosh, it feels like as long as I've been cutting hair, right? 100 years. I am now that old homeschool mom that has all the old kids that are in college, and I'm just kind of trailing the others, where all these new fresh ones have babies still and strollers and diapers, and the one that started kindergarten. I'm like, I did not think I'd be this old someday. But in any case, as I think about my children doing school and learning something new and getting the information to stick and then pulling out information that's already there, I'm always thinking of oils that are going to help rewrite the pathways that are in their brain that are going to help them be confident in learning something new. So many times, I'm going to put you guys on the spot. Let's do this. Before I say what I was about to say, let me ask, how many of you get excited if somebody says, you know what, you should learn a couple new languages this year? How many of you are like, yes, I'm absolutely able to do that? No one's raising their hand like, yeah. I'm surprised. I thought you guys would go, yeah, for sure. Yes, Deb, of course. Right, because you know your brain, you can do anything. You can do anything. Not so easy. That's a great answer. Not so easy for you. And yet with our children, this is something I've really challenged myself. So I'm not telling you guys anything I haven't challenged myself or done myself as I teach these classes. I experiment on myself, then my kids are my guinea pig. And I'm like, hey, let's see how this works with the masses. I have my children, or if you've had kids in school before, or you know kids in school, we have them every year. Here you go, new stuff to learn right now. By the end of the year, oh, and PS, you're going to have a test on this and whatever. We expect them to do that. As we get older, when we're out of school, if you're like me, it was like, oh, thank God, I'm never going to have to take another test again unless I want to. And then I decided to become a hairdresser, and I had to take a test that, listen, the next time you guys go to your hairdresser, just thank them. It's not easy. Passing that state bar, and I hear, not state bar, excuse me, that's a law school. It's a state exam. It's not a bar. Anyhow, I don't remember what it's called. Passing that is, I'd rather take 1,000 calculus tests than that test again. That was so stressful. It had to be perfect. Licensing exam. Thank you, Lisa. And then when I became a scuba diver, a dive master, that was stressful because I'm underwater, taking off my mask, taking all of my stuff off at 60 feet. I could die. I mean, it just on and on it goes, right? And I'm like, I would give anything to go back to high school and take that test again. It's all relative. And yet, here we are at our ages or whatever season of life we're in. And it's like, how about we learn a couple new languages? And we're like, that feels not so easy. And yet, when we look at our oils and we see what they can do for the brain, all of a sudden, we can start to say, you know what? Learning 3 languages in 1 year, it's actually not that hard. I was actually made to do that. My brain can do that with the help of these oils, because it can go in and clear off receptor sites where there might be some junk clogging it. I can use my monoterpenes that can act as another bit of a cleanser. All of a sudden, we can start to see how incredibly useful our oils are. So the first thing I want to share with you are our phenols, and it's spelled, and I'm going to write it in the chat and then I'll spell it out for those watching later. I know there's a few of you watching later. So phenols are constituent in essential oils that are stimulating to the nervous system and the immune system. They clean and purify the receptor sites of the cells. If our receptor sites are not clean, the cells cannot communicate with each other and the body will malfunction. This results in all kinds of diseases. It's like putting your brain through a little car wash. The phenols have antioxidant properties and a high level of oxygenating molecules. The second constituent, let's see if I can spell this from memory. They do it, is sesquiterpenes. Awesome. There was a time where I had to write that word over and over as I was writing my emotion class. So sesquiterpenes, after the phenols do their work, they finish their work, the sesquiterpenes are up next. Now, obviously, as I explain this, it feels like it's this progression, but you all know how the body works. It's like this in the blink of an eye. These constituents erase miswritten information in our DNA. They're present in almost every essential oil. The amount of it is different. So oils that are high in sesquiterpene, our friend cedarwood, sandalwood, those real heavy, thick, richer oils. The chemistry of these oils tell us that they're the largest group of terpenes known naturally in the plant and in the animal kingdom. They're larger, the molecules are larger than monoterpenes, and they have a thicker consistency. Think about vetiver. If you've ever used vetiver, you know it's real thick. Some of us have put it in our pocket, right, to get it to warm up and come out, or in the wintertime, it's just so cold, you kind of have to rub it together like this. So when you smell an oil like a sesquiterpene, you know, reminding yourself that it is now erasing the miswritten information that's in your DNA. Myrrh, yep, that's another one. Thank you, Lisa. The last constituent they're called monoterpenes. These powerhouse constituents seek to repair any damage to cells. They're able to help turn our cells back to factory setting. So think about your cell phone for a minute. Sometimes you just need to power down and do a big reset. Sometimes you need to return it to basic settings in order for the new programs to be installed. Yes, this is frankincense. And I'm so glad that, Lisa, you said that, because frankincense is in almost every, I would say almost, because I don't know 100%, but almost every oil that Gary designed for emotional healing. Frankincense is the common thread with the Feelings Kit, with the Freedom Collection. Frankincense is a powerful oil. It's monoterpene, it's a monoterpene intense oil. So with that in mind, I thought about, well, I could give you guys some oils that are high in these, but we all have our apps, we all have resources. A quick search on the interweb can help you figure out some oils. And the cool thing is if you have to go do some research, like what oils are high in phenols? What oils are high in sesquiterpenes? How about monoterpenes? Then you might even start to be a total geek like me and pair them up into 3 different groups. And start off with your phenols. What's your favorite from that? Take a few minutes and breathe that in. Then move on to your sesquiterpenes. What are your favorites here? And then finally, your monoterpenes, and what are your favorites there? Breathe them in. Each time you play with them, take a note and say, how did I respond to that oil? What did I think of? In our time together this month, one of the things I hope you gain from this is having more of an introspective view on yourself and your mind and your psyche. Asking yourself questions that maybe you wouldn't have asked before. Why did I respond when that person said that? What was it that they said that caused me to feel this certain way? Yes, I know we are responsible for our emotions and only we can make us feel a certain way. I get all of that psychobabble. However, when somebody says, let's say something off-putting or cuts you off, it can create a negative response. Why? Have you ever asked a question? Why did that make you frustrated? Why did you feel sad about that? Because if you start asking enough why questions, if you go back to kindergarten and start why, all of a sudden the answer bubbles, and it's great because then you can go just scrape it off. Moving on. Okay, at some point in everyone's life, as I mentioned, we all have experienced rejection. What we do with that emotion is what sets us on a trajectory for our lives. If it's not dealt with and appropriately responded to, rejection can lead to an increase in anger, anxiety, depression, jealousy, and even sadness. It may also reduce performance on difficult intellectual tasks and can contribute to aggression and maybe sometimes poor impulse control. Remember a moment ago how I said, how about we learn a foreign language? What is your response to that? I'm not saying that if you responded as a no, that you have rejection stuff. It's one of those things that over and over we find is that if somebody has had rejection on expressing themselves in something new they learned, they are less likely to learn anything more difficult. They're less likely to use their brain in that way because in the past, maybe they were made fun of, maybe they didn't do it right, maybe they didn't whatever. And if it wasn't dealt with then, saying, well, I'm just learning, consider the source, not a big deal, and just really move through it beautifully, it can hinder you and come up and bite you in the end at this stage in life. One of the things that I love, I mentioned that the learning language, that's a big thing that our family's doing, is we all downloaded this app and we're all learning a bunch of different languages. And I have all their languages on my app, and every once in a while I'll tap in and just learn some words just so that I can practice with them. And it's really fun because my children, 2 of them work, well, 3 of them now work in a restaurant. And so they'll talk to the other people who speak Spanish or Italian or whatever. And every single one of them who are native Spanish speakers or native Italian speakers have said, your accent is great, keep practicing. And when they say something off, they don't laugh or make fun of them. They just laugh like, oh, I totally get it. It's like when I learned English, and then they just sort of banter back and forth. There's no rejection. It's beautiful. It's a pulling out and helping each other learn. So rejection does hurt, and there's no way around that. What we do with it is so key. Acceptance is a primal need. As I was researching this and studying, like, what are the not psycho people? My apologies, that did not come out right. What are the therapists and psychologists and all those folks saying about it? And so much of it is very, very self-help, very consider, doing this or tell yourself that. Not one of them said acknowledge that it stinks. Acknowledge that it hurts. We have to understand with any negative emotion, we can start talking in such a way and all the positivity and all the things, and it's still, there's a part of your soul that needs to be heard and acknowledged, especially for those who grew up in a home and in a culture and in a generation where children were to be seen and not heard. Understand that there is a part in your soul that has to be heard, even if just for a second. This is why journaling, one of the reasons, there's so many why journaling is so great, but one of the reasons is to be able to sit down and say, I didn't like this. I felt this way when this and such happened. Okay, I'm choosing to move through it. How do I move through this? How do I heal this emotion? Being accepted is a primal need. The need to be accepted in every circle we find ourselves in life is a basic human survival requirement. It just is. Isolation is no good. We see this in the animal kingdom. The one who is alone gets picked off by the predator, by the enemy. Same thing happens in human circles. Nobody likes rejection. The world will tell you it doesn't matter if people like you or groups or society accepts you. What matters is what you think. And I would respectfully and strongly disagree with that. Just because I've seen how that plays out. Giving ourselves a pep talk is awesome. Speaking life and affirmations is incredible. But when your part of your soul isn't being heard and acknowledged, that matters. It sounds perfectly wonderful and offers some bit of platitude, but without being accepted, people tend to sink. Some people, not all, but some people tend to sink into loneliness, which is never a good thing. Most people want to belong and connect with others. God designed us to be in community. We're meant to have connection. So feeling rejected by people and believing that you're not wanted, whether it's for a job or dating or friendship, is not a pleasant experience. And if in the moment it's not dealt with, acknowledged, and then moved through in an appropriate, healthy manner, again, that can be buried into your cellular level. So it's easy to understand why many people may dread and even fear rejection once you've experienced one or two times, even something as simple as not getting picked for dodgeball or being picked last. You just remember that. And your body, you guys, you know that your body will always avoid pain at any cost. How many of you absolutely love running? How many of you have ran and it's like, that really hurt. I don't want to do that again. Thank you, Lisa, right? Yep. Teresa, you ever raise your hand who has experienced that? When we do something and it's uncomfortable, your body's like, hey, let's not do that again. You dance, dancers don't run. That's true. Sharon, you love running, right? I love running too. It doesn't hurt me like I hear it hurts other people. So our body, this little example of that, our body doesn't like certain things that are uncomfortable, so we don't want to do them. If our body, again, this is on the body level. If you were in our class over the summer, you learned that, or we remembered rather, that our spirit, you have a soul, you're in a body, 3-part being. Science will show it. So your body, if it didn't feel right, will try to run the show and be like, no, not doing that again. So when it comes to emotions, anything that triggers that memory of that didn't feel good, it's not going to want you to do it. So here's some things to get you started along the way. If you acknowledge and you say, yep, I have that, or I feel like this is a part of my story at some point along the road, the first thing we do is validate your feelings. Number one, I've mentioned that several times, but just one last time, and then we'll move forward. Validate it, acknowledge it. And as we do this, everything that I share, it's with intention, and you journal through it. Morning pages, a brain dump, anything that's going to help you get it from inside your brain out onto paper. This is so valuable. If you sit in my classes, journaling is going to be out the second to none of using essential oils. That is, that's my drum to beat, because I've seen such power and healing in journaling. And I know there's different fears surrounding journaling, and we can address that at some point tonight. It's probably not going to be the time, at least on the recording. We can talk about it after at the class. But journaling through it is so key, because you're able to see the emotion for what it is, and you're able to see it for what it's not. So you write it down, you step back, and you can assess it. You might even literally get up and walk away, see it for what it is and what it's not. The second thing that you can do, depending on how deep the rejection is, I probably should have stated in the beginning, we are not talking about deep childhood wounds, so this can be to that. If you are somebody who has that type of deep hurt, that is a time to do a one-on-one coaching, maybe do some one-on-one AFT sessions with me. This is really just to scratch the surface and pinpoint certain emotions and heal from that. This might help you get through some stickier ones that you're having a little harder time. For those deep wounds, sometimes those take a little bit longer. And I say that as I say the next point is looking for a learning opportunity. Look for a learning opportunity in the rejection. I used to live in a neighborhood when I first moved to Frisco, and I so badly wanted these women to like me and to have them be my friend. What I realized is that they were the type of women that complained about their husbands and their children all the time. And I loved my husband and I loved my children. It was a gift from the Lord that we weren't really close friends. They were lovely people to cut their hair and chat with and maybe go to lunch here and there, but having a close relationship, the opportunity that I could see from that is, oh, we're actually different people. That would not have been a good match. So you take the rejection from that and turn it around and say, oh, I can see the value in this, or I'm going to grow from that. Getting rejected on a job interview, something like that. What could I have done better? I mean, we do this anyway in life. Having a daily habit of doing something, presenting material or finishing a project and asking, what could I have done better? What did I do well? That type of thing. The third thing is keep things in perspective. Keep things in perspective. How monumental is this? Is this something that can be a blessing? This goes back to really the second point is what are the learning opportunities here? The fourth thing is remind yourself of your worth. As you journal through this, do your morning pages or brain dump, whatever you choose to call it, you start to look at these questions or these points, I should say, and then you remind yourself of your worth. And let's say the rejection came from someone very significant in your life. family of origin, a parent, a sibling, a really close friend, a spouse, a partner. Once you remind yourself of your worth, and most importantly, how the Lord sees you, reminding yourself of those truths, renewing your mind every day, an incredible thing happens. You start to shift the perspective and you see the person who did the rejecting with fresh eyes. As you start to heal from it and start to see things for what they are and what they are not, there's this neat thing that happens where there's a compassion that may well up. And you're able to see that if the rejection was done in an ugly, maybe in an unkind way, that old adage, hurt people, becomes very true. And you start to see that person who was just, they themselves were hurting. This takes some work and it takes a little time. It doesn't happen overnight, but it does happen. And when you feel that shift in your body and your soul, it's like, this is great. Then you can move on to the next thing, number 5. And this is to face that thing that causes, I should say, a little bit of fear to stop you. Start to look at it in the face. You see things for what they are. You've kept them in perspective. You validated yourself. You know your worth. And now you can turn around and face it. And using your oils, this is where we start to use our acceptance. The acceptance oil, when I first started using this oil, or someone actually sent me just a very generous amount of it when my husband first passed. And it was a little irritating. I'm like, why would somebody send me the oil acceptance and my husband just passed? That was so, I don't know. It just was a triggering thing. Just the word. I think somebody in our group mentioned how breathe again. They were looking at the word breathe again in a whole new light. I looked at that, and because in my mind previously, I thought the word acceptance was from that stages of grief, right? You get to acceptance. There's one part. I'm like, I am not accepting this. This is not where I'm at right now. That's not what acceptance is at all. Let me read to you the description of this because I want to do it justice. And we all have these same tools from the reference app, reference guide for essential oils. I don't have my reading glasses on, so I have to do like this. Sorry, guys. So it says the blend was formulated to help stimulate the mind to open up and accept new things in life, enabling us to reach toward our higher potential. It may also be beneficial in helping overcome denial or procrastination and to help create feeling of security. When inhaled or diffused, this blend may help calm a troubled mind, promote feelings of confidence and courage. By calming the raging storms of mental frustration, we are finally capable of viewing our true position in life. We can then accept where we are and move forward with confidence on our path to achieve loftier goals. What's interesting is that at the time, all I could see was the word acceptance. It took me a couple of months to pull that oil back out again and read the description. And I thought what's interesting is to have an open mind and accept new things in life. Sometimes accepting new positions in life is not fun, so we don't want to do it. But acceptance helps that. The other thing is, as I read here, that it calms a troubled mind and promotes feelings of confidence and courage. Sounds like another oil we have, right? Valor. When you have any situation in life, rejection is one of those emotions that's really top of mind, but any situation can cause that old foe, fear, just to block you and say no. And we can speak to the mountain, we can say all the things, but fear is an intimidation tool. And using an oil like acceptance or even valor can give us the courage and the confidence to say, I'm sorry, not only just speak to it, but step on it and move through it. And then we have the oil purification. A long time ago, as I dove into emotions using essential oils, I thought, well, for heaven's sakes, most of my people sign up with a starter kit. And most people at that time, there wasn't the option. It wasn't as, I'll say, cost effective to buy a membership and then get your feelings kit and all that. So I was coming up with things that let me just, all these oils have an emotional component to it. So when I looked at purification, I thought, well, now these are some cool oils in here. Citronella. Citronella is a powerful one for emotions. It clears out the mind. Lemongrass. Lemongrass is one that will alleviate resentment. Rosemary, mental fatigue, memory. Myrtle. Myrtle's a hormone balance and emotion balancer. Myrtle's a powerful one to calm the mind. Purification also in the Healing or Releasing Emotional Patterns Using Essential Oils book, that blue book with the drop on it. If you have it, you know the one I mean. That's a beautiful book. But for rejection, purification is the oil that's recommended. I think they're onto something in that. And then, of course, joy. When you use the oil of joy, you know it's a high frequency oil. It's an oil that lifts your emotions. It raises your frequency up so that if anything like rejection has come on and is trying to stick, there's no place to land. Your body and your soul become like Teflon, and those emotions can just slip off. And I know when we first started using essential oils, we learned to put joy over our heart, but anymore, I love putting it over my adrenal glands and my kidneys, because there's some emotions back there that need to be released. Think about it. In your adrenal glands, your adrenaline gets released there. The joy can help suppress the production of excess protocol. Well, I don't know where that word came from. Cortisol. The protocol for reducing cortisol. Maybe that's what I was thinking. And I know in here you all have incredible ways to use joy. We all have our own ways, or whatever oil. Lisa, I'm going to share this because for those who are not here live, but to apply purification over the liver for anger. Yeah, that's brilliant. Brilliant. Rejection can cause some anger at times, as I mentioned early on. And so noting, understanding, getting in tune with your body can help that. Okay. I wanted to keep this at an hour. I want to be respectful of your time. So I have one last thing to share, and I would encourage you to sign up for next week's class, and we'll dive into more of this. We'll do a little repeat and then some new information. The final thing is, once you do all that, you face it, speak life and truth of yourself. It's easy to fall into a pattern of self-criticism, especially after experiencing rejection. But this is something that you don't want to do. We want to constantly speak life and truth. And the final thing I'll share with you is clean up your mental neighborhood. Spending time with people who care about you can reinforce your knowledge that you, in fact, are wanted. Mentally cleaning up your neighborhood. If you've missed our aroma boost sessions last week, there's a couple days in there where I talk about the people in your neighborhood. It's that appropriately again, all mentally, not making a big show of it on social media or having a big powwow confrontation with your family, but just acknowledging that, like, oh, you know what? My great grandfather thought that women should work really, really hard in the kitchen and have a million baby, not a million, 100 babies and never have a job. Well, that was lovely for them, but that's not really somebody that I want to. That's not a thought process that matches with who God made me to be. So, with that thought and that mentality, they're going to be an across the street neighbor where I just kind of acknowledge, but don't really give it any mind. Rather, you might have the truth that God says about you, someone on your porch. It's like, no, you were designed to do this. This is your calling. This is your purpose in life. And if that doesn't include the 2.5 kids and the picket fence and the little poodle in the driveway, that's not for you then. The people on your porch have your back and you have theirs. They're for you. They're cheering you on. There's no jealousy. There's no you should, you need to, you ought to. It's just, what do you think you should do? Can I do it with you? That sounds like fun. The other day in our class, and I stole this from Melissa Pepping, so I have to give credit to whom credit's due, but I remember when she first opened my eyes to this, she said, these people are the ones who you tell them you want to do underwater welding. And not only do they want to do it with you and they're encouraging you, but even though you almost drowned last year, they're willing to buy you 12 life vests in all your favorite colors. You're going to take swimming lessons together, right? It's that kind of a friend. Knowing these people is invaluable and they're out there. And I'll leave you with this. If you haven't found them, maybe it's because you're investing a lot of energy on those who have rejected you in the past. And you're constantly trying to figure out why, and you're making assumptions about people. Well, there's no room for people who are ready to sit on your porch in your rocking chair and sip lemonade and tea with you, because all these other people are taking up too much space. It may be time to ask them to leave so that you can make room for new friends in your neighborhood. Those of you who are on live, do you all have any questions before I turn off the recording, or any comments, anything you want to share that wasn't shared in the chat? Okay.